The morning fog still clung to the harbor when a gray naval boat pulled alongside the towering USS Liberty. Among the crew boarding that day was a woman in a sharply pressed uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a bun, her face unreadable. She carried only one duffel bag. Most didn't look twice. A few glanced her way, assuming she was logistics or admin support. No one imagined she was a commissioned officer. She didn't seem to mind. She moved with quiet precision, her boots steady on the steel deck. A young crewman met her near the gangway and glanced at his tablet. "You must be the new liaison officer," he muttered, still typing. She answered with a calm nod. He didn't catch her name. As they walked through the corridors, the crew passed her with indifferent eyes. Some whispered. One officer asked if she was from personnel. Another assumed she was from public affairs. When corrected, they blinked, surprised, but said nothing more. She didn't protest. She listened. She watched. Inside the USS Liberty was buzzing with pre-deployment energy. Tactical teams drilled with simulated threats. Engineering ran diagnostics. No one noticed how her gaze paused at every security checkpoint, every sensor panel, every strategic display. Her silence wasn't shyness. It was calculation. They assigned her to monitoring duty, a task meant for junior staff. She took the seat without complaint. As others barked orders or chatted, she began logging communications with a focus that seemed excessive for someone in her role. She didn't look frustrated. She didn't need to. Her eyes never stopped moving. Sophia Reed had learned early that silence could be a shield. As a child, she'd sat beside her father while he polished his service medals, listening to him talk about leadership and humility. He'd never raised his voice. He'd never needed to. When he died in an ambush during a classified rescue mission, she was 16. She never forgot how he was remembered not as a hero with headlines, but as a man whose name quietly protected others. That compass he always carried was returned to her scratched and bent. She never let it out of reach. She wore her values like that compass. Steady, practical, unspoken. She avoided drama, ignored vanity, and spent her years moving through assignments without making noise. It wasn't that she lacked ambition. She just didn't chase attention. Her file was neat but vague, filled with commendations and shadowy placements. At 38, Sophia looked unremarkable to most. Brown eyes, hair always pulled back, uniform spotless, but plain. She didn't wear makeup, and her posture was more martial than graceful. But to those who really saw her, there was an edge under the surface. Calm, but alert. She had once trained a group of officers in surveillance operations. Only a few knew she spoke Mandarin fluently. She'd served as a translator in peace talks, then disappeared from public records for 2 years. When she reappeared, it was always in roles that looked small on paper. No one questioned why. Sophia never explained. She believed in doing the work, not performing it. And when people underestimated her, she didn't flinch. She let them talk, let them assign her menial tasks. What they didn't know didn't bother her. Still, she remembered every slight, not with anger, but with accuracy. She logged words the way others logged coordinates. She remembered faces, tones, hesitations. She wasn't watching to punish. She was watching because she knew timing was everything. That morning on the Liberty, she ate alone in the officers' mess. A few glanced her way and quickly looked back. She wrote in a small notebook as she ate, her pen moving slowly. She didn't need to write much. Just reminders. Just patterns. There were no photos of her family on her desk. No personal items beyond the compass, which she positioned the same way on every posting. It wasn't habit. It was ritual. Something to ground her in places where she didn't belong or wasn't wanted. When she finally stood to report to her assigned officer, she didn't smile. She didn't offer small talk. She waited, listened, acknowledged orders. Her voice was even and professional. The others assumed she was just another support officer sent in by some office upstairs. They didn't realize the mistake. Not yet. Sophia's first day on duty felt colder than the ocean breeze outside. The officers barely acknowledged her presence as she stepped into the communications bay. One glanced up and mumbled something about a new admin support. Another made a quiet joke about HQ sending in someone to take notes. No one asked for her opinion. No one offered help. They handed her a tablet and told her to monitor signal clusters like she was a trainee, not a seasoned officer. She didn't correct them. She just nodded and took the seat in the far corner. Behind her back, the comments continued. They wondered out loud if she was a diversity hire. One joked she probably hadn't seen real combat. Another said he'd give her a week before she cracked under pressure. They didn't whisper quietly. They didn't need to. They assumed she wasn't worth lowering their voices for. She typed quietly, scanning data without reacting. The words didn't touch her face, but inside she filed them away. Not with bitterness, just precision. She had seen this before. New faces, old biases. It never surprised her, but it never stopped stinging. She remembered one officer looking directly at her and asking if she was there to observe, not contribute. When she said she was assigned as tactical support, his eyebrow lifted like it was a joke. He turned away before she finished speaking. When she reported to the executive officer, he barely looked up. He reviewed her file with a dismissive frown, said her role would be limited until further notice. She accepted the decision calmly. She didn't ask questions. That alone annoyed him. At dinner, the mess hall quieted slightly when she walked in. She sat alone in the far corner, eating, slowly taking notes in her small notebook. Across the room, two officers laughed and mocked a training scenario gone wrong. One mimicked a female voice. The others laughed. She kept writing. But even as she seemed still, she was listening to everything. Voices, footsteps, pauses between conversations. The timing of each comment. The tone shifts. She wasn't hurt. She was watching the way a hawk watches wind. While others joked or griped about their shifts, Sophia watched. Every screen, every interaction, every pause. She wasn't just logging signal data. She was memorizing patterns, protocols, the way officers moved when they thought no one was paying attention. From her quiet station, she noticed things no one else did. A lag in the comms relay between bridge and engineering. An unusual delay in encrypted signals. A junior officer who seemed to linger near secure access points a bit too long. None of it screamed sabotage, but it whispered inconsistency. She noted it all. Nothing dramatic. Nothing bold. Just a flick of her eyes and a tap of her fingers on the screen. If someone had been watching her closely, they'd have seen a pattern of precision. But no one was watching. At one point, a technician left his console open while taking a call. Sophia leaned slightly to glimpse the logs. Nothing unusual at first glance, but her instinct told her otherwise. She wrote a quick note in her small notebook, closed it, and looked straight ahead again. Later, during a systems test, the tactical team reviewed simulated threat scenarios. Sophia wasn't part of the group, but she listened. One scenario mirrored an operation she'd handled off the books. The crew missed a critical gap. She saw it, said nothing. Just one glance was enough to confirm her suspicions. It wasn't arrogance that kept her silent. It was timing. Influence meant nothing if it wasn't earned. And the truth was, they weren't ready to hear her yet. Not until it mattered. When her shift ended, she didn't return to her quarters right away. She walked slowly through the lower decks, tracing the path of internal communications relays. Her steps quiet. Her posture relaxed. Her mind sharp. The silence of the corridors let her thoughts breathe. She didn't just want to know what was going on. She wanted to know who she could trust. On a ship this size with a mission this sensitive, she couldn't afford to guess. In a dark hallway, she paused beside a sealed compartment. A keypad blinked red. She didn't touch it. She just stood there a moment as if listening for something beneath the hum of machinery. Then she moved on. calm, unnoticed. The following morning, the air in the control center was thick with focus. Officers huddled around digital maps running final checks before the day's major simulation. It was a complex joint defense drill testing the crew's reaction to a multi-vessel incursion. Everyone had a role. Sophia was quietly assigned to monitor secondary signals. She took her seat without comment, her fingers ready. Her eyes didn't linger on her screen. They shifted quickly, observing the larger tactical layout. From experience, she knew simulated threats weren't just about data. They were about rhythm timing patterns. The scenario began. Multiple contacts appeared on the outer perimeter. The tactical lead, Lieutenant Coleman, barked out initial orders. Adjust frequencies. Target zones Delta and Echo, shields up, standard moves by the book responses. But something didn't sit right with her. She watched the projections dance across the screen. The timing felt too perfect, too staged. That's when she saw it a feint. The main threat wasn't at the perimeter. It was in the southeast corner, moving slow, almost too slow to notice. She rose quietly and approached the tactical table. Her voice was calm but clear. If I may, this pattern looks like a decoy. The real attack is coming from the southeast. Coleman glanced at her with annoyance. We've done this scenario before. That approach isn't in the standard playbook. We stick to protocol. She gave a brief nod and returned to her station. 3 minutes later, hostile signals flooded in right where she said they would. The ship's simulated defenses couldn't realign fast enough. Alarms blared. Targets breached. System failure confirmed. The room fell into awkward silence. Coleman slammed his hand on the console. There must be an error in the simulation parameters. Captain Harris stepped in with a frown. Run diagnostics. We don't have time for faulty drills. Sophia said nothing. She logged her data, stood, and offered to assist with the analysis. Her suggestion was dismissed again. She returned to her corner. But this time a few glanced in her direction with something different in their eyes. Later that afternoon, she was reassigned to equipment maintenance, a task far below her skill level. She accepted it without resistance. She worked alongside a junior engineer who kept apologizing for the mess. Sophia just smiled. It's good to stay close to the basics. As they adjusted a relay circuit, the engineer noticed Sophia correcting errors the last crew had missed. You've done this before. Sophia didn't respond with a story, just a quiet nod. Familiar enough. The ship's intercom crackled. All section leaders to the bridge. High priority communication incoming. Sophia wiped her hands, packed the tools, and walked toward the command deck. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. On her way, she passed the secure briefing room. Through the partially open door, she heard the captain's voice. The exercises in the Taiwan Strait might be cover for a tech transfer. We need to prepare for intercept. She kept walking, her pace unchanged, her face unreadable. But inside, she had already begun updating her mental map. Routes, names, timelines. By the time she reached the communication center again, her notes were already evolving. Not just signals now, motives, discrepancies. She wasn't on this ship by coincidence. She was here for this. That night, Captain Langley sat alone in his quarters, the soft glow of his tablet lighting up his focused face. He'd requested a complete personnel review for the upcoming mission. One file stood out. It wasn't the name that caught his attention, but the way it refused to open fully. Sophia Reed. He entered his standard clearance. The screen paused, then demanded higher access. That was unusual. He tried again. Still locked. Finally, he entered his override credentials. Another layer unlocked, but large parts were still redacted. A third level of access was required. His pulse quickened. He'd reviewed thousands of files, but never one this heavily guarded. He keyed in his emergency security clearance, usually reserved for intelligence threats. The screen flickered, and slowly more data filled the page. What he read shifted everything he thought he knew. Sophia wasn't just a transfer from headquarters. She'd led extraction operations in hostile zones. She had served on Black Ops teams, participated in undercover missions in Southeast Asia, and coordinated tactical rescues under fire. She had 3 commendations he had never even heard of, because they were classified above his level. He scrolled further. South China Sea Surveillance, Cyber Disruption Campaigns, Operation Mirage, Operation Sentinel. Her name was tied to all of them, each with success markers, each involving threats to national security. At the very end of the file, the final page made him sit back. A Medal of Honor recommendation, signed by 2 Joint Chiefs. Details still partially redacted, but enough was clear. She wasn't backup. She was the reason the Liberty was part of this mission. He reached for his comm unit. Commander Pike, update the mission briefing. Add Lieutenant Commander Reed to the primary roster. Priority 1. The briefing room buzzed with quiet anticipation. Officers circled the tactical table, waiting for orders. Lieutenant Coleman glanced around, confident in his position. Then the door opened. Sophia entered, not with a flourish, but with certainty. Captain Langley looked up and nodded. Join us at the table. A few eyes widened. A few officers exchanged glances. Coleman's brow furrowed. She walked forward, unbothered by the whispers. Langley stepped aside. Sophia took the seat at the head of the table. No one spoke. Langley broke the silence. Lieutenant Commander Reed will be leading this phase. Her operational experience is extensive. Sophia looked around the room. Her voice was calm but firm. This mission is not what it appears to be. The technology transfer threat is real, and it's closer than you think. The room stilled. Even the usual skeptics went silent. Coleman crossed his arms but said nothing. Sophia tapped the console and revealed a new layout. Civilian shipping routes, timed maneuvers, known tactics used by rogue agents. She explained them with clarity and precision. Someone finally whispered, "Wait, she's Javelin's handler." Langley answered before Sophia could. "She's the reason we even have a chance to stop him." Sophia kept her gaze steady. "I've tracked this target across 3 countries. He's used these same diversion tactics before. He knows our protocols. That's why our simulations failed." Now every eye was on her, not with suspicion, with respect. Even Coleman leaned forward, taking notes. When she finished, no one questioned her authority. They just asked what needed to be done. The next morning, the USS Liberty was all motion. Systems booted up, weapons readied, frequencies scrambled. But the biggest shift wasn't in the tech. It was in the air. The crew looked to Sophia now. They followed her movements, waited for her instructions. She moved through the command center with quiet purpose. Gone was the hesitation in their eyes. Ensign Cho asked her questions with eager focus. Coleman reviewed tactical plans beside her like a peer, not a critic. Even the executive officer deferred to her insight without hesitation. Sophia didn't gloat. She didn't mention yesterday. She simply got to work. She updated the team on surveillance shifts, rerouted drone feeds, and reassigned 3 officers based on gaps she had observed during previous drills. No one argued. They just adjusted. At the bridge, Captain Langley observed the flow and said little. He knew a true leader didn't need to declare authority. She earned it. Every officer she touched began working better, faster, more precisely. In the war room, she briefed the team on contingencies, civilian decoys, unexpected weather shifts, cyber jamming. Each solution felt tested, lived. She didn't speak in theory. She spoke like someone who had survived each scenario before. When she assigned Cho to a key relay station, the young woman blinked. That's normally a senior post. Sophia's reply was simple. You see patterns others miss. That's what we need today. The ship moved into position by nightfall. Everyone was on edge. But it wasn't fear. It was readiness. They knew who was leading them, and they trusted her. The mission began at dawn. Radar scans showed multiple vessels converging near the strait. The civilian traffic covered the military ones, just as Sophia predicted. Her voice was steady over comms. Shift formation. Block the eastern corridor. Signal Charlie team to flank. Her orders cut through the tension. Coleman coordinated flanking routes. Cho held the relay line with flawless timing. The Liberty moved like it had trained for this exact moment, because Sophia made sure they had. The rogue ship tried to slip through, a blind spot. It didn't make it far. Sophia had placed a drone there hours earlier. The moment it triggered, the Liberty adjusted position and intercepted. The crew erupted in cheers as the hostile vessel was surrounded. The stolen tech secured. No one said her name. They didn't need to. Every eye turned toward her with quiet gratitude. When the debrief began, the captain listed key contributions, then turned to her. "Would you like to add anything?" She shook her head. "You've said enough. Let's just finish the job." Later, as the crew celebrated, Sophia stayed on the bridge a few extra minutes. Not alone, but apart, watching the lights on the horizon fade into morning. The mission was done. She wasn't there for applause. Later that night, Sophia sat alone in her quarters. The ship was quiet. Most of the crew was off duty, enjoying a rare moment of rest. Her desk lamp cast a soft glow across the room. On the shelf beside her bed sat the brass compass. She picked it up and turned it in her hands. The metal was worn smooth at the edges. The dial still turned, but faintly. Inside, tucked in the lid, was a photo. Her and her father in uniform. He had his arm around her shoulders. She was only 15. He was smiling. The way he smiled when he was proud, not when he was trying to look strong. She had never forgotten that day. It was before his final deployment. Before the mission that never made the news. Before the quiet funeral with no details. Before the letters from command filled with thanks but no answers. He taught her to keep her focus, to speak when it mattered, to act with honor even if no one noticed. Especially then. She remembered his voice in her head every time someone misjudged her. "You don't need to be seen to make an impact." She placed the compass back on the shelf and stood up. Outside her door, the ship's corridor was dim and still. She walked toward the observation deck, needing space to breathe. The stars outside were bright. The water below, calm. Her mission here was done. But it wouldn't be her last. People like her didn't get long breaks. They moved where they were needed. Quietly. Effectively. As she leaned against the railing, she felt something shift. Not in the ship. In her. The weight she always carried felt just a little lighter. Not because she'd proved herself, but because they had seen her. Truly seen her. And for a moment that was enough.